Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. You are not seeing double. That's a mirror behind me. This week we are working on this piece behind me, and it is a mirror, and it's a really pretty vintage wooden mirror. And I picked this one up off my local Facebook marketplace, but it was broken. It had a lot of damage to it, a lot in the corners where all this molding was. And my customer wanted a really pretty vintage looking dresser mirror. So it fit my bill, but I needed to figure out how I could fix the existing damage. So I'm going to use some of the tools in my toolbox. Some wood you bend moldings are going to come out. We're going to fix this mirror up, and it ends up looking beautiful. It matches with my dresser set absolutely perfectly. So this is a way to take those vintage dresser mirrors and fix them up so that you can keep them in use and make them loved again. And that's exactly where this one is going. So you guys, it's also going to have this really pretty blended finish that matches the dressers it's going to go with. So I'm thrilled with how it came out. It took this vintage wooden dresser mirror that probably was a throwaway before and is going to put it back to life again. So stick around. Let's get started. Here's where I started on this mirror that I picked up off Facebook Marketplace. My customer loved it. It's exactly the right style, but I need to start off by giving it a really good cleaning and cleaning out all of these old moldings. It looked like it had been stored in a garage for quite some time. I'm using Greenie's cleaner. This one had a lot of dirt built up on it, even had some spider webs in the corners that I needed to make sure I get out. I went around the entire frame using the cleaner, and then I'm going to come back with a little bit of water and just make sure I get rid of any cleaning residue so that it doesn't affect the adherence of my paint. Once my mirror is nice and clean, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and give this some primer. I want to prime this because it's a really dark wood and it's got an old dark stain on it. I want to make sure that that stain doesn't bleed through and discolor my paint over time. To make it nice and easy, I'm just going to use a spray-on primer from my hardware store. This is 123 primer from Zinsser in the color gray. The spray gets into all these intricate details really easily, and this is going to be a nice base for my paint to go over top of. I had mentioned in the beginning that this mirror had some damage to the corners, and you can see here how the very edge of this detail is chipped off. So I'm going to need to cover that up, and what I'm going to use is wood you bend moldings. I have 4 of these wood you bend medallions, and I'm going to go ahead and heat it up using my heat gun. I'm going to apply a little bit of Titebond Quick and Thick adhesive to the back, and then I'm going to use my heat gun again to mesh this into the corner. Wood you bend moldings get flexible when you heat them, so I can mold this to the exact shape of this mirror, and it's going to look like a natural part of the mirror. Once I mold this in, you'll never be able to see the damaged part that's behind it. Unfortunately, I had 2 corners that had this same piece that was damaged, so I went ahead and did those first, but I ended up deciding to apply this medallion to all 4 corners so that they would match. Because I'm applying these over an existing molding, I made sure that I used quite a bit of glue so that it got into all those crevices and matched up to the existing surface. And then I heated it so it meshed to it perfectly. This was just the right solution that I needed. I'm so grateful for wood you bend in situations like this. Watch at the end, and I think you'll be really surprised how much these look like an original part of the existing mirror. The 45-degree corners had started to come apart at the seams on the corners of this mirror, so I also used this as an opportunity to throw some wood glue into those. With all my repairs complete and my wood you bend moldings added, I'm ready to start adding some paint. I'm actually painting this mirror to match a dresser set that I just did, so I'm going to use the same colors for the mirror that I used on the dresser set. These are some from Wiesel Paint, and I'll go ahead and list the colors in the description for this video. This is just my base coat. I'm going to give this a blended finish to also match the dresser set, but I'm just going to lay on my base coat in roughly the areas that I want the colors to be. I'll really perfect this on my second coat. Right now, I just want to get some colors on here. I'm using my Klingon brushes. These also work really nice for blending. I'm going to use a paintbrush for each color, and I ended up using 4 colors on this. I'm going to work my way around the entirety of this mirror, getting the color laid on. I did use lighter colors to highlight some of these medallions. I really want those to stand out. Let's go ahead and put some music on and finish up this base coat. This mirror isn't a square, it's actually a rectangle, and so you'll notice that I went ahead and used the green for a highlight on the longer portions, but I didn't put those up the side because they're shorter sides. I'm doing a very basic blend on this base coat. It doesn't need to be perfect. When I come back for my second coat is when I'm really going to perfect this. Here, as I paint the corners, you can really get a good shot of these Would You Bend medallions. Once they get some paint going over top, they look like they belong. I do use a little bit of water when I'm painting over the medallions because it just helps thin the paint out and get it into the very deep crevices where I added those medallions. All right, now I've got my base coat all the way around, and I'm going to come back and repeat the process and add my second coat. This second coat is where I'm really going to perfect these brush strokes, make sure they're nice and smooth and clean, get these blends really worked out. I start by placing my same paint colors over the base coat where they belong, and then I'm going to come back with a dry neutral brush and I'm going to brush those colors together. I'm still using a brush for each color and then that dry neutral brush. Anytime my dry neutral brush starts getting a little muddy from blending the colors together, I take a rag and I wipe it back as much as possible. If it starts to get too dirty or too muddy, then I'll go ahead and pull out another brush and use that. These colors are pretty similar in tone, so it made for a pretty easy blend. I always recommend that when you're doing a blend, the closer in tone that your colors are, the easier that they're going to be to work together. I'm using the same technique here where I use a little bit lighter color to highlight the medallions so those really stand out. Once I have all my colors around the outer edge of my mirror, I did come back with my Wise Owl and Black Cherry, and I'm going to go ahead and dry brush over the corners. I just used this deep plum on the very corners where I've got these medallions because I really want those to stand out. My dressers also have some gold details, and so I want to add that to the mirror so it matches as well. I'm using a little bit of Redesign with Prima Decor Wax. This color is called Eternal, and it's a rich, deep antique gold. I'm going to apply this gilding wax just using my finger, and I'm going to run it over the very top edges of this molding, and it's just going to catch the raised most portions. This gold gilding wax stands out beautifully against the deep colors. This gilding wax will dry permanently after 24 hours, but I usually do go ahead and just seal over top of it. That gilding wax really made a world of difference. It brought out all the details in these moldings. This mirror looks really luxurious and elegant. It looks like a real vintage piece now. I let my paint dry over 24 hours and my gilding wax is also nice and dry, and now I want to seal all this in using a little bit of clear coat. I'm applying Wise Owl matte varnish to match the dresser set. I decided to go ahead and brush my clear coat on because I didn't want to get out my sprayer just for this mirror. I'm using a Klingon brush and it gets into all those details really well. You may have been noticing over this entire video that I go ahead and paint right onto my mirror and I don't mask it off. That's because I find that it takes just as much time to come back and clean the mirror as I would spend just masking it off in the first place, and it actually gets me nice clean edges if I just paint right onto the mirror. But now I want to remove all this excess primer and paint and clear coat that I got onto my mirror. So I just come back with a razor blade scraper. These are my favorite scrapers. They're just from the dollar store. And I start off by scoring a nice edge of my paint. That's because I don't want to tear the paint along the edges of my mirror. And I'm going to go ahead and run it in a vertical, and then I come back and go horizontally into the frame of the mirror, making sure that I get off any portions of paint that are still left. With my mirror nice and clean, this matches my dressers perfectly. You guys can find links for everything I use in the description for this post. You can find more Brushed by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and my website at brushedbybrandy.com.